A warm welcome to all of you on this Youth Day. This is the day of the youth, and we need to give them opportunities to grow in the way of God and the faith of God. And we are glad that you found yourself here today to be a part of this service. We're glad that the church can set aside a time and a space and an opportunity for young people to express themselves and be able to give glory to God. And we trust that from this exposure, they might learn to fear God and come to know Him in deed and in truth. There is a story that occupies the Old Testament, one that we have all heard before, and that one I'd like to remind you of today because of its salience and because of its importance in the Christian's life. It's the story of a young man whose name you know. His name begins with D, and actually his name is David. David was the son of Jesse, a Bethlehemite. David learned to fear God from early in his life. While Israel dwelt in Egypt, God called them to go to the land of Canaan. In those days, there were no plane flights, there were no SUVs, there were no fancy cars. They simply had to use P2. Do you know what P2 is? Your two legs. Two legs. P is for private, of course. Private, two legs, they're yours. And they had to walk. And in so doing, many a day they went through the territory of other people who certainly didn't want them to come through. How would you like to have 6,000 people pass through your street or your backyard? Not a pleasant thought, not a pleasant sight. On their journey to Canaan's land, they had to go through the land of the Philistines. The Philistines were fierce. The Philistines were strong. The Philistines were determined not to let Israel pass through their land. They had a champion, a guy who was taller than Kareem Jabbar. Tall, big, brawny, strong, and determined. He was sure these people were not going to pass through his land. And so he stood there, screaming to the top of his voice when Israel came within his land. Send me a champion that I might defeat him. If he defeats me, we will be your servants. But if I defeat him, woe to you Israelites, you are going to be your servants forever. And he screamed this to the top of his voice every day. On one day, Jesse, the father of David, sent David to carry some lunch for his brothers who were in the Israelis' army. When David got to the army area, he heard this man screaming to the top of his lung, and he couldn't believe. He said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Why would he treat God's people like that? We've got to defeat this man." And his brothers, Elab and Shimmer, and the other brother said, "Shh, don't speak too loudly. We don't want to disturb that man. He's already a sore. He's already a thorn in the flesh. We cannot let him know that we're even out here." So they sought to quiet David. David said, "I will go and fight against this man. I'm not afraid of him." And the word got around to King Saul, Israel's first king. And Saul said, "Bring that young man to me." David was ushered into the presence of the king. How would you like to be ushered into the presence of Obama? You're all nicely dressed, hair all done up, and you're ready to meet the Obamas. So it was David's turn to meet King Saul. Went into his presence. And he was surprised that King Saul was such a simple man. Tall, big, as tall as Goliath. And Saul said, how do you mean you want to go and fight this giant? Everyone in my army is afraid of him. I'm not afraid of him. And in verse 33 of 1 Samuel 17, I want you to know this chapter, young people. I want you to follow this story intently because it is a very important one. In verse 33 of 1 Samuel 17, and Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but, there is the first appearance of that word in our story, thou art but a youth. And if you read the bulletin, the subject is, what can a youth do? Young people, throughout your youth, older people will be saying to you, what can you do? You're only a youth. And therein is where you need to rise up to the opportunity of showing them that I might be a youth, but I know where I'm going. I know that this way of righteousness is the way I ought to take. And he said, you're about a youth. And a man, he is, listen to this, and he a man of war from his youth. Young people, this opportunity that you have is a rare one. Somebody said, youth is wasted on the young. You've got to show them that, no, my youth is not wasted on me. I'm going to use my life for good. I'm not going to get into drugs. I'm not going to be toting a gun. Heard of the young man who was shot yesterday in Staten Island. It is said he was a gang leader for years, part of the Bloods. You don't want to be a part of that, do you? You want your life to be given to Jesus Christ from your youth. Because here was David, a youth, trying to make himself something for God. And this devilish Goliath was from his youth, a champion, no match, a young boy, going against a man standing tall. It is said that this Goliath had a man who went before him with a tall shield, taller than David by far. It is said that his spear, yes, there was a time when combatants fought with spears. Now we have nuclear bombs. We have napalm bombs. We have all sorts of scientific methods of destroying the enemy. But in those days, a guy carried around a spear and a sword. And so, David said, you cannot go to fight against that giant like that. You need armor. You need to be fortified. You need to be ready. And very foolishly, Saul, tall, big, as the king of Israel, sought to put on this young man his armor. What a foolish thing. Wouldn't fit. After they got all of it on David, Saul gave him his own sword. Saul is also a very tall man. And David said, this doesn't fit me. I can't go with these. They're not for me. I have in my Bible written, be yourself. Young people, determine to be yourself. There are young men and young women out there who want to make you into what you're not. And unless you know where it's at, to use a young people's term, or yes, unless you know what you want to be determined to do, you will be and can be led astray. David said, these don't fit me, I don't want this. What's the alternative? He said, I'll go in the name of the Lord. I will go determined with the strength that I have. I have strength. Because one day a lion came after me in my little area there with my sheep, and I defeated that lion. A day or two after, a bear came after me, and I defeated him. I will go out there in the name of the Lord, and I will defeat Goliath. Sounded pretty braggadocio for a young man. And so they could do nothing because before long he was on his way across the valley to meet Goliath. Goliath after looking around, saw a little stripling, a little young man coming up the valley to him. And he said, "Am I a dog that you send this little boy out here to fight against me? I will give his body to the birds of the air. He's dead meat." The Bible has some exciting stories, doesn't it? And so David continued across the field to the giant. And David said, "You have defied the armies of God. I will feed your body to the beasts of the field. Today you are a dead man." Everybody was waiting to see what's going to become of this situation. A young man defying an older man because he was not afraid to stand for his truth and for his understanding. As they drew nearer, David crossed a brook, a little river, and he stooped down and picked up 5 stones. Smooth stones, said the word. I hope you read the story when you get home. And he put one in a sling. You know, little kids like slingshots. That's one of their first weapons in life. He put one of the stones in a slingshot, and he continued toward this giant, unafraid, undeterred, not being turned back. He was determined, "I am going to get this giant today." As he drew nearer, no doubt he had a prayer in his heart and in his mind. Young people, you can pray. Young people, you should pray. Because there's a greater force out there known as the divine source, God's source. And if you tap into God, God can begin leading your life from now in school. So you can stay away from those evil kids that only dealing with drugs and other things that's not good for you. And David put that stone in that sling, and as he drew nearer to the giant Goliath, he began swirling it until he let it go. And that smooth, shiny stone hit Goliath in his forehead. And before long, Goliath was on the ground. David ran on that body and pulled his sword out and cut off Goliath's head. It's in the Word, and it's for us to understand. That day, David caused Israel to conquer the Philistines, and in no time, the Philistines' army was upon the ground, just about, and David was triumphing over them in the power of God. In any problem that seems beyond you, remember, kids, you can rely on God for strength, and God will help you to overcome no matter how big an enemy you have. In verse 42, and when the Philistines looked about and saw David, he despised him, that's the giant, for he was but a, here's the appearance of that word again, he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And David that day defeated Goliath because God was on his side. Or should we say, David was on God's side. Young people, let God be your guide. Let God be your strength. Let God be your guide in everything. And God will bring you through. In the book of 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12, it says, let no man despise your youth, but be you an example. Young people can be an example. Let your youth be an example to the elders. How many young people speak to older people? The converse is true. How many older people, the older ones, speak to the young people? Young people need to be encouraged. They need to be admonished. They need to be guided. There's a word that's prevalent today. They need to have mentors. And so older people, let us help these young people come to find God, come to know God, so that we can be proud of them and they can be proud of us in the work of God. And finally, when David had finished slaying Goliath, going back to his camp, the king said, who is this stripling? Who's this little fellow that did this great deed? And Abner, his armor bearer, said, I don't know. And so they called David and said, who are you? All the people should ask that about you young people, because they're stunned by the things you do that's right, the things you do that's honorable. David said, I'm Jesse's son. And that's all we are, sons of God, because we've been born of God and are willing to dedicate our lives, young people, to do what is right and to serve God from our youth. May God help you to be an overcomer and to be the type of example that God wants you to be.